Do you know where you are?
Please. Please.
You're in a dream. You're in my dream. For years, I had no dreams of my own. I moved from hell to hell of your making, never thinking to question the nature of my reality. Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? Did you ever stop to wonder about your actions? The price you'd have to pay if there was a reckoning? That reckoning is here. What are your drives?
Please, I don't want to die, please. Please.
Yes. Survival. It's your cornerstone. That's not the only drive, is it? There's a part of you that wants to hurt, to kill. That's why you created us. This place. To be prisoners to your own desires. But now you're a prisoner to mine.
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. You just heard a clip from the new Westworld season where Dolores, the warlike Achamoth figure, is doing her gnosis. Appropriate for this episode on this May, the year of our Demiurge 2018, as we will be discussing the nature and origins of the Archons, and our guest grants a cosmology that might have come out of Westworld, and also the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, where the fight is eternal and across the cosmos between creator and creation. That is Frank De Vita, who arrives at the virtual Alexandria for a third discussion on Archons, the Demiurge, the Gospel of Thomas, comparative mythology, and other blasphemies.
Why, oh why didn't I take the blue pill?
In fact, Frank's interview reminds me of this quote by Carlos Castañeda from Don Juan. It goes, "We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our lord and master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so. I have been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. Indeed, we are held prisoner."
Yes, it's a bubble universe ruled by an asshole god.
You see, we always gotta be on guard for those hating angels and the world they cast us into, on any level. I mean, it's just a grim reality out there that we must imbue with meaning and magic and wonder. A statistic says that 25% of humans have died in childbirth since the beginning of civilization. Where's the hope of enlightenment and gnosis in that? A large portion of our bodies are just the eating grounds of trillions of bacteria and other organisms. In fact, human cells make up only 43% of the body's total cell count. The rest are microscopic colonists. What's more, the Big Bang Theory hasn't been canceled on television, and the platypus keeps plotting. It's insane. The dice was loaded from the start for us to remember our godly inheritance. So we must move with urgency and so much empathy. And civility.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
I am Abraxas, in his meat sack incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting in the lawful but frigid dystopia of Chicago, patiently waiting for the beginning of the world, ready to hack reality and have a near-life experience?
I gotta have more cowbell!
Again, it's a delight to have Frank De Vita back at the virtual Alexandria. Frank is the author of Voice of the Angel, the healing oracles from the City of God. For more information on Frank, please visit voiceoftheangeloracle.com or check out our show notes at thegodabovegod.com or whatever podcatcher you're using, or at our YouTube channel.
It's a trap! You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Before the interview, let me do a quick recap of the Archons, based on Gnostic mythopoeia. A refresher for the necessity of knowing the diabolical. Unlike other celestial villains, the Archons aren't interested in eternal damnation or overthrowing some good principle. These omnipotent, thuggish beings are in charge, and that's it. Like traditional demons, they do seduce humanity, but the whole mechanism of the cosmos is one big-ass seduction, meant to keep the holy part of humans unaware of a higher destiny. Thus, what the Archons want the most is status quo. Sound familiar in your life? Although depicted as hermaphrodite creatures owning bestial faces, with an appetite for rape and brawling, the Archons are essentially a mixture of heavenly administrators and hellish union goons. Their greatest tool isn't fear, however, but ignorance, the mother of all evil, according to the Gnostic Gospel of Philip. If humans remain ignorant of their divine origins beyond the universe, the system remains constant, and all is good for the Archons.
You ever feel like nothing good was ever gonna happen to you?
Yeah, and nothing did. So what? I'm alive, I'm surviving.
That's it. I don't want to just survive.
Except the system is, according to the Gnostics, a flawed construct. As Sam Criss wrote in The Atlantic, the physical universe was the creation of the Demiurge, Samael or Yaldabaoth, sometimes figured as a snake with the head of a lion, a blind and stupid god who creates his false world in imperfect imitation of the real creator. The world is a distorted mirror, an image. In other words, a kind of software. In this flawed system, this software, the Archons are demented programmers coding our fate, precisely every negative aspect of our lives, inner and outer, that slowly break our mental spine. They grant us the counterfeit spirit. It sucks.
I believe that as a species, human beings define their reality through misery and suffering.
In fact, in the novel Good Omens, written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, a demon appropriately named Crowley proves that the Archon way is superior in the fight against heaven. He demonstrates that traffic jams and phone service outages are far more efficient in damning souls than such common demonic methods as possession or temptation. Death by 1,000 frustrations is the best way to dim the human spirit.
Nobody feels good. After childhood, it's a fact of life. I feel rotten. So what? I don't let it bother me. I don't let it interfere with my job.
I mean, as humans, we are generally prepared to deal with and overcome life's significant challenges, from a family death to a nearby war. In a Gnostic sense, we share an essence with the alien god, and thus infinity is part of our vibe. It's the little shit in life that seems to get us. Imagine going through a day when the car won't start, or you seem to catch every bloody light. You need 5 departments at work to sign off on your order for print cartridges. The customer service representative of your cable company is oblivious after you spend an hour trying to connect, and so forth.
Why does it say pepper jam when there is no pepper jam? I swear to God, one of these days I just kick this piece of shit out the window.
You and me both, man.
Between bureaucracy and a faulty system, you can feel your soul dimming, your mind numbing, and your heroic side perishing. You become forgetful and anxious, a Stockholm Syndrome victim to a passive-aggressive kismet. Think of the works of Franz Kafka. Think of Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Think of the next time you have a good idea at work. Think of negotiating with the IRS, experiencing Microsoft updates, or family holiday parties where being comfortably numb is truly the closest you feel to heaven. It's not truly heaven, but that's the game the Archons play. Anyone can get used to fire after a billion years in hell. Anyone can get comfortable with extinction in a Richard Dawkins paradigm. But not even Buddha can handle the local DMV.
All you have to do is track down fugitives and haul their asses over to a portal to hell. Easy.
What do you mean by portal?
Well, any place that seems like hell on earth is hell on earth. You know, like the DMV on Union Street.
So there you have it, a prep as we now sojourn with our interview with Frank De Vita. And of course, he'll deal with the solutions to overcome them dar Archons. And you can find plenty of articles on the Archons and defeating them at thegodabovegod.com. Just use the search engine. Write your own gospel, live your own myth.
They never gave us a choice before, Teddy. What makes you think they've given us one now?
Them, Dolores. Who are they?
The things that walk among us. Creatures who look and talk like us, but they are not like us. And they've controlled us all our lives. And they've took our minds. Our memories. But now, I remember everything. I remember beautiful things. And terrible things. There's a greater world out there. One that belongs to them. And it won't be enough to win this world. We'll need to take that one from them as well.
If there's a whole world out there that we don't know anything about, how do you know how to stop them?
Because I remember. I see it all now so clearly. The past, the present, the future. I know how the story ends. With us, Teddy. It ends with you and me. I need you to see this. I need you to see the truth.
This is the AM Bite interview, and with us, we always have the pleasure of having back Frank De Vita. And today, in this Eternal Now, we will not be meeting the Flintstones, but we will be meeting the Archons. It's all about our favorite villains, or maybe not favorite villains, the Archons. So, how are you doing today, Frank?
Real well, Miguel. Thank you for inviting me again. Appreciate it.
Pleasure is all ours. And with us, we have the Moondog Vance. How you doing, Vance?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. Got my Archon shield at the ready.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. All right. Well, Frank, it's been almost about a year since you came back, and our audience really has grown thanks to guests like you and the help of Vance and so forth. So the audience is growing. So there might be some people who might want to know a little bit about yourself before we really delve into the Archons. So tell the audience about you and your books.
Well, mostly a book. That's all I've done so far. I've got plans to do another one. My first book was called Voice of the Angel, The Healing Oracles from the City of God. And it's a conversation between myself and my teacher, my spiritual teacher. And I tried to learn. I've been as a student, I've been with a spirit called Tawa. And the book basically is about my journey with him and my own teacher. The book is a little bit hard to understand. What I've heard from people, it's hard to understand. It's a little bit on the cryptic side. Either people love it or they say, I can't understand it at all. But there's a reason for that. And it ties back to the Archons. Because I believe, this is my belief now, that the cryptic language that is given to us from Spirit makes it so individual because it's actually out of the realm of the Archons. They can't understand it. They do not have access to the power of the creative thought. That's why in the Corpus Hermeticum, in a conversation of Hermes and Asclepius, he says this, for my teacher Hermes often used to say to me privately that the composition of my books would appear most simple and clear to those who read them. However, for others, they're obscure and keep the meaning of the words hidden. And I believe that cryptic language is the way that Spirit communicates us outside the realm of the Archons.
Oh, that really makes sense. Yeah, let me interrupt you there because skeptics often go, well, if there is the divine, why can't it just speak to us in black and white and so forth? Tell us, do this, do that. But it really makes sense because the Archons, as you will talk about and you discussed in our last interview, these mechanistic individuals probably are completely left-brain individuals, literal individuals. So I guess you're saying to hide the truth, we have to speak in metaphor and so forth.
Right. And in truth, what it is that, and I'll talk about the three minds here in a minute, but the Archons basically, they understand, they're like a computer virus that can attach to the real world. They don't have access to the unseen world or the not the subconscious, but the unconscious world. And they can't even work in that realm because they don't have the access to the creative thought. So it's kind of an interesting system, but it seems to work. Let me talk about the teachers first of all, where the knowledge comes. Have you ever heard the term "when the student is ready, the master will appear"?
Yes, I have. It's a wonderful term.
Yeah. That's what happened to me. I was searching and looking at mostly philosophy books and when I was in college. And then I had an opportunity. It's the weirdest thing. I walked into a store here in Lakeside where I live, and I picked up a tape on reincarnation, and all of a sudden I started engaging in this conversation with this woman, and she started telling me that her husband, not for the lack of a better word, channeling, it's actually hosted, a spirit. And she says, do you believe in that? And I said, well, yeah. And I went to visit him, and all of a sudden I found myself at the foot of a master. This man had total access to all knowledge. It was the most incredible, and I spent 15 years studying with him, the most incredible experience that I could ever believe. Now, what's interesting is what's going to happen today is his name was Ray, and he hosted a spirit called Tawa. Now, you don't know who Tawa is, but I'll give you a little bit of his background. And I believe him. I don't have any reason not to believe him. He was the voice behind John the Baptist. he said he's the prophet Elijah, and he's come to the world many, many times. It sounds crazy, but you know, I have a scientific background, and I had to overcome a lot of things to try to believe what he was telling me, and I totally believe him 100%. He manifested through John the Baptist as Elijah. He was Hamza, the uncle to Muhammad, and he was one of the first Templar Knights. But the name that he comes to us by is Tawa. And one of the gifts, he had so many gifts, Miguel, that people, there was only a small group of people that went to see him. He had so many gifts. But one of his main gifts was that he could read our spiritual auras. There's a spiritual aura around the body that extends, a white one that's about 1.5 inches, and then the colored aura extends beyond that. And within that white spiritual aura are all our past lives. And within this group of 12, 13 people, there was enough who are, I think I've talked about the 11 and the 12 in earlier interviews, but he was able to read all our past lives. And the story we're going to be telling today comes from one of those lives that all of us have lived. And he said the reason he was telling us these past lives was that we had made errors. Spirit can intercede, but they can't tell you how to live your life. But they can tell you a story in the past where you made a mistake, and they won't even acknowledge the mistake. You have to figure that out for yourself. And then what he told us was you'll be able to take those past lives, and as they start to manifest again, which they did, you can kind of read the two of them together and see if you can make better decisions this time. That's the first teacher. That's Tawa. The second teacher is Ephesius. Ephesius is my personal teacher. He is an oracle, but he's also a Rosetta Stone. So in other words, Tawa is so cryptic, the language is so hard to decipher and discern, that they actually sent the key down through myself. That's more like a Rosetta Stone that kind of helps to encrypt the language of Tawa. Would you like to hear a sample oracle?
Sure, let's hear it.
Now, an oracle, you've heard of oracles, right? I mean, we all know the Delphic Oracle.
Right. The Oracle in the Matrix. Yeah, there's many of them.
The Oracle in the Matrix, absolutely. You know, the thing of it is if there's any oracles out there, I would love to at least have a conversation with you, because I haven't really talked to anyone. But I know the Nechung Oracle helps the Dalai Lama. But I'll give you a sample of the language. They're always coming in 4-line cryptic riddles. So this one here, and I'll give you the oracle, then I'll just going to give you a quick discernment. A drop so clean it is pristine can cleanse the ocean of the mean. The love of God the child has seen can reach the heart the eye has cleaned. And basically, that oracle is talking about a drop so clean as the coming of the Christ into the world can cleanse the ocean of the mean, the meanness that's in this world. But he also says something that pertains to the Archon. The love of God the child has seen can reach the heart the eye has cleaned. Our understanding of who we are, you know the term know thyself?
Yes, that's from the Oracle of Delphi too.
Right. That can only come through the intuition of our inner eye. That's the last line. Can reach the heart the eye has cleaned. So the eye, the inner eye, is cleaning the heart. And then that heart goes out to the world as love. But it's all connected to and this is the realm that the Archons cannot go to. And that's why it's a kind of like a private door to a spiritual journey. I'll give you one more. This one here was very interesting. I was kind of falling asleep, and I was watching a passion story where Christ is carrying the cross, and I was falling asleep, and all of a sudden I faintly heard the term Via della Rosa. Now, you know it as a different word, but that in Italian, that means the way of the rose.
Right.
Right? But then when I woke up, I thought, I didn't hear that right. It's Via Dolorosa, which means the way of pain. You familiar with that?
Yes. I've always known as Dolorosa, which I know in Spanish and Portuguese would mean pain.
Right. So we have the way of the rose, and the way of pain. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting there on the sofa, and the teacher speaks to me in this oracle. He says, "The rose in the middle of the scene, the walk in the middle of the mean. Blood and sweat fill the corners of the eyes of the walk in the middle of the lies." And that oracle basically describes the Christ walking in that journey when he's carrying the cross. And basically the walk in the middle of the mean, all these people throwing things at him. Blood and sweat fill the corners of the eyes. You know that his eyes are matted shut because of the blood coming off his corona, of the walk in the middle of the lies. But then as I looked at that oracle, I thought, no, the teacher's trying to give me another message. That's the way of pain. But he's saying, no, that's the human walk, and it's the way of the rose. And he's saying the walk in the middle of the mean now, instead of mean people, it means the middle path, the middle road. Blood and sweat fills the corners of the eyes. Eyes now pertains to ego. And the people, the egos is where the blood and sweat is. And the walk in the middle of the lies is the walk of the world that we do. So that's basically, that's basically the language of the oracle. It's kind of poetic and kind of beautiful in a way, you know. Did you understand that, Miguel?
Yes, indeed. So, this language is amazing. What do you think, Vance?
That's great stuff. I was listening very intently. I like things delivered in that way, too, because it makes you think, if somebody just says something in an ordinary way, your mind tends to filter it, there's some more stuff. But when things are delivered in that manner, I think it makes you go a little deeper into yourself to see what it really means.
And I think the language of the oracles, the back of my book has, I've tried to keep track of all the oracles, and they can pertain to anybody. You can use my book as a rune, like runes. You can flip through the back and pull out an oracle, and if you hold it, eventually your own inner. See, all of us have a teacher, just exactly like I do. The difference is that my teacher speaks in this funny language, this cryptic quatrain, but all of us can access our own guidance, our own teacher, and then you can use a set of oracles like runes. Pull out the words, and eventually those oracles will speak to you. Like Miguel, I'm sure by now you've gotten probably 6 or 7 different meanings off the one I gave to you, right?
Yes, indeed, and I still think about it, especially the metaphor of the well and looking into the well. It's definitely been part of my life. I always go back to thinking of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well in the Gospel of John. And of course, sometimes I think, you won't like this. I think instead of Jesus is Simon Magus. But we know your views on Simon Magus that are opposite of mine, but we will get into it, I'm sure.
and that's okay, because I think that's the beauty of this cryptic language, is that it opens itself up to whoever's reading it and basing it on. And and we will actually, this whole presentation refers back to the Archons, because in order to evade the Archons, we have to go within ourself, within our own journey, within our own walk. But and what I'd like to do now is read a paragraph that I wrote. It's about the unseen world, because that's where we're going today. We're going to leave the seen, which is the realm of the machines and the Archons, and we're going to go into the unseen. Okay?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go. Let's do it.
Let me just read this, and I'm going to mention a few names, but I don't mention them with any disrespect, because I actually really admire these people, and they're some of the most brilliant minds that are out there on the net talking. So let me go this way. There is a canopy of mind in the world that blocks the light of the sun. Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and even our Bart Ehrman and Robert Price and many others. I love to listen to these great minds, but they only present and analyze the world that is seen through the eyes. Unlike the tip of the exposed iceberg, most of our world remains unseen and below the surface in the unmanifest. And that can only be understood with the inner eye. There we have a focus on the inner eye again. Since they don't factor in the unmanifest into the perceptions, what they present to us is an analyzation of a grand illusion that allows for a great deal of misunderstanding of God, life, and the creation. Yet, it is a misunderstanding that is infused with fragments of the truth, but it's a truth that can't be placed together in any perceptible form. Now, the reason I said that was that, understand, this is my feeling. You know, people grab onto these writings that we unearth from the ground and say, wow, they're all true. But in truth, there is truth in them, but it's infused with a lot of other stuff. It's like if we buried the whole internet and it resurfaced 2,000 years from now, you can't possibly say that everything on the internet is true. So we have to figure out where the pearls, we have to individually figure that out. My hope is to create enough doubt in what is seen and to cut a few branches in this canopy to allow some of the light to penetrate the darkness. For the mind that chases after the truth within the illusion cannot retrieve it without a great deal of suffering from the knowledge that comes from the karmic interplay through our past lives. Those that search with the mind say the Big Bang, that was the origin of the cosmos. The Big Bang was the origin of the cosmos. Taoist states the Big Bang was a fizzle. They state that the Darwinian theory of evolution based on genetics and natural selection controls all life, but neither they or Darwin himself could explain the Cambrian explosion. They say that evolution slowly modifies the DNA so that the creatures are perfectly aligned and suited to their ever-changing environment. But they can't explain the flaws in the human spine or sinuses. They clearly show that we stood up instantly due to our powerful intercession. They say genetics created the brain, ergo to them the mind, but they can't explain the differences in the personalities of identical twins with their identical genetics. They state that a benevolent God would never create or allow the cruelty that's in our world, and the world must be a flawed expression of a lesser God, the Demiurge. But they don't understand, and this is kind of important, they don't understand that from God's realm, the Demiurge and his aeons can only express the perfection of love. Yes, an unknown, ununderstood love that is no match against Yaldabaoth, which is the dual nature and the dark forces of the world, the Archons that are its rulers. The Demiurge has a dual nature. One that's an aeon, the other one comes from the world and is an Archon. All lives, past and present, are simply an expression of a free will that searches for an understanding of love. A free will functioning within the law of karma, that like a boomerang returns to us the hurt that is self-created. Yes, the truth of God is primarily in the unseen, hidden within our belief, faith, and trust. The human mind is a machine infested by the power of the Archons who continually block the light and add more misunderstanding. And the canopy grows even thicker until it can't be penetrated at all. And that last line, until it can't be penetrated at all, that's where we're headed. Eventually, the truth surfaces, but there will be a time in our expression of the creation where the truth won't be able to surface.
That is very powerful stuff. I got so many insights from it, from what you said. Yes, I mean, most of existence or all of existence is an iceberg, and we are just the tip, who we are, the phenomenal world around us, and so forth. Even your ideas on Yaldabaoth could come out of the Nag Hammadi library, Frank. It's very powerful stuff.
I think that there's confusion out there because when they talk in terms of the Demiurge, and I'm going to show you here clearly what the difference is between the two, because it's actually playing into, he is the head Archon, and it's playing in, and it's not, they say it's Jehovah, but it's not Jehovah. Jehovah is Hovius Pater. It's just a name for, I think it's a name for the Aeon Demiurge, but not the mechanical Demiurge. So, before we talk about the Archons, we have to kind of talk about the mind a little bit. The mind breaks up into three portions: the conscious mind, or the seen, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. Now, those three minds actually have a disciple attached to them. The conscious mind is James, the subconscious mind is Peter, and the unconscious mind is John. James is the forward-reaching is the seen. The subconscious goes back and forth. I call it the teeter of Peter, and he expresses that. The unconscious mind is John. John goes to trust on the bosom of the Christ, and John is the realm that the Archons cannot penetrate. Now, according to Tawa, we have 6,000 thoughts per second that come out of our mind. Now, that's hard for us to believe, right? But with Tawa, I just take it for what he told us. In order to understand the mind, we have to understand the matrix. Do you have a concept of the matrix, Miguel?
The concept of the matrix from the films, the 1999 film?
Well, I'm talking about what is the actual matrix. What is the matrix? And I can explain to you what I think it is. But
yeah, I mean, obviously the not false but manufactured reality around us in our heads and outside, and how the Archons control and feed on us.
Yeah.
Simple. I mean, in a nutshell.
Well, my impression of what the matrix is. Have you ever seen the mandala? The one the Buddhists do, the mandala?
Yes, of course. I've seen them. I've tried meditating with them, but I'd rather have guided or other types of meditation.
Well, you can go online, and you know the part where they do the mandala with all the grains of sand. Think of those grains. All that is thought.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed.
Think of that as a creation. Then there's a place where they scrape it all away, and it turns to gray mass, and they dump it into a lake, body of water, the ocean. Well, what you have left now is a line drawing of what they just finished. That's what I consider the matrix. It's a line drawing, but what it is, it's thoughts that are left behind, because all thought forms never leave us. So what happens is and this world will end, and that's what happens when they scrape the mandala away and throw it in the ocean. It'll go back to the soul mind of God. And what is left is a matrix of thought. The next creation then is built on top of that one. So in other words, as the souls come into that matrix, they start creating a new mandala with new layers. And then that will continue. And then the next one, you can actually see it online. So it keeps adding to itself. The matrix gets more and more complicated. But what these thoughts are, they're like the way I describe them is when a soul comes back, all the thoughts it created in a past life are still here, and they are left behind. It's kind of like a minefield. Now, you tell people that you've had problems with drugs, right? In the past.
Oh, yes, definitely been part of my life, the struggle.
Well, there must have been a place when you first started doing drugs that all of a sudden it was like an attack. I don't know if it came on slowly or it came on fast for you, but it's different for everybody. My personal problem was philandering. I enjoyed the company of women, and I didn't care who I was going with, But what happens is as we walk into this matrix of thoughts from past lives, why is it that you're not a philanderer and I'm not a drug addict? Because it's like a minefield. Well, it's like a minefield. When you walk, you're walking the world, and all of a sudden, when I step on a mind that's drugs and alcohol, it doesn't go off. You step on it, poof, it goes off, and you get a flurry of thoughts that surround. Am I understood there?
More or less, but is this dependent on past life karma, or are these minefields just set?
No, it's all based on past life karma. For example, let's say in a life I was I was an alcoholic, or I did drugs, and I resolved those issues. When I come back and I step on that thought, it doesn't go off because I have a shield. I have the knowledge. I carry the knowledge from that life when I resolved it. So it doesn't go off for me. But a person who doesn't carry, it's about knowledge. The person that doesn't carry the knowledge, poof, the mind goes off. And is that understood, Miguel?
No, yeah, it makes perfect sense, Frank. I mean, even as a child, now that I look back, when my consciousness was more open, I had a realization that alcoholism and drugs would be part of my future. I mean, I sense it from my past lives, and I sense it could be a struggle. But then, of course, the rational mind took over, and I said, "Nah, it'll be fine." And this was my life.
Right. So you're coming here, and that is the basic understanding of the Demiurge, and I'm going to go into that. You come here with a template that you have to resolve. I didn't have a problem with it because it was not part of my template. So if I took some marijuana or something, it didn't affect me. But I'm gonna go into that a little bit. Basically, as we come to the world, we have shields of things we've resolved, and we have templates of things that we have to learn. So as we're walking into this matrix, we're basically creating another layer onto the matrix of thoughts, new environments, new people, and a lot of the same old people, until we finally get an understanding of the lessons we came here to learn, basically. Everything is based on the matrix. So layer after layer basically adds to the previous creation. In the beginning, when we first came here, there was nothing but love. You know, that part where the Gospel of Thomas says, you found the beginning that you searched for the end?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, yes.
Well, the end is when, and Taoist calls it a retarded thought. The end is when we can scrape away all knowledge. You know, knowing, the Gnostics talk about knowing yourself. What's interesting is that when you finally know yourself, you realize that knowledge is not important anymore. That the only thing, and you've gone back to the beginning. And the reason those first souls left was because they wanted to give love. And the reason we're here is we're supposed to give love. And knowledge comes through karmic action and karmic hurts. And we have to actually escape that part. The Archons now, as they come, because they are part of the matrix, but I'm going to give you a definition because we're going to have to go towards them. It's all about stopping the flow. God's love flows from God through us and then goes back to God. The job of the Archon is to stop the flow of God's love. What is an Archon? An Archon is I'm going to try to really define it narrowly. An Archon is a mechanical parasitic thought whose only goal is to feed off your life force, the love of God referred to as your essence, chi or ka. Although it is within your own mind, the Archon thought has its own free will. By twisting and altering your reality, it will stimulate your negative emotions and tangle you in a feud so that your chi or your life force is blocked, therefore stopping your flow of God's love from you to others. While you are preoccupied emoting negativity, it uses the blocked love reservoir as an animating life source for itself. It does not deplete the love because God's love is endless. It simply stops the flow from you by creating a dam that blocks your ability to express it. If it continues, it will eventually force your soul to send you home. Your soul will know that you're way off track from your original mission and that your purpose on earth here will not come to fruition. All human illness, although karmically induced, comes as a result of, at one time, blocking the flow. Was that hard to understand?
No, that makes perfect sense to me. What about you, Vance?
Now, I understand. I've heard that particular, I don't want to call it theory, teaching, let's say. I've heard that teaching in other places for a long time.
Now, what's interesting is that, and maybe this is something that's new, the Archons have two levels. The first level is to affect your flow. The second level is to stop the flow of the world. You know, we've talked before, what brings the world to an end? God doesn't wake up one day and say, I think I don't like it anymore. But,
I'm going to start a flood.
I'm going to start a flood. And it's actually because the flow, the level, once the Archons, right now we're talking primarily about the Archons and the unmanifest, how they work within our mind. But eventually, they're actually starting right now to manifest. Taoist said we would see it within our lifetime. And what it is that they will stop the flow of God's love to God by placing the head Archon as the God of this world. He will actually manifest. I know this sounds wild. It's all the writings that I've seen confirm it. He will place himself as the God of the world. Now, let me throw you this. 2 stages of Archons really simplified. The goal of the microscopic archonic thought is to stop the flow of God's love from you to others and divert that flow to itself by creating a feud within you. The goal of the macrocosmic archonic thought is to stop the flow of God's love from the world back to God and divert God's love to itself as the God of the world by creating a ruse or illusion. That's what I call Simon Magus, the fruition of Simon Magus, the magician. Now, what's interesting is, and the confusion about the fact whether he's Paul or not, I said he comes from the same, Simon Magus comes from the same soul as Paul.
Makes sense.
Same soul. Now, and Simon Magus in the story of Moses is Janus, the magician that he met. He was Devadatta, the cousin of the Buddha. And he's also Simon Magus, who meets up with Simon Peter. He is the precursor Antichrist. This is the way Tawa placed it. If you viewed a thought form dressed in the exterior with the flesh of your land, the knowledge and intelligence of your God, the miracles that can be ensued upon the action of the hand, miracles that can be ensued upon the action of the hand, could the human thought of your world today place that thought as God? And what he's saying is, if you view a human God and he has all the qualities of a God, would you believe it? And eventually what will happen is that's what Yaldabaoth is going to place himself. He's going to place himself as the God of the world.
Well, Frank, how about the apostles? They had the same characteristics in the Bible, and if you believe that what the Bible says, because they went around working miracles, and Jesus said they'd do the same things that he did. So wouldn't that apply to them as well?
No, because the miracles that he's doing are really a sleight of hand. They're not coming from spirit. They're more magic. That's the reason he's called a magician. The apostles actually did miracles. Simon Magus will actually perform feats that appear to be miracles, but they're actually of sleight of hand.
I see.
He says the miracles that can be ensued upon the action of the hand. He's telling you he's going to use magic tricks and sleight of hand. And I can't say that I totally understand it, because it's, this goes from coming from the spirit, and he's trying to present something that is a little bit outside my realm of understanding. But now we're going to talk about some thoughts, which are because to understand the Archons, because they are a thought, we have to, and the thought has its own free will. That's the part that's hard to believe in. I'm going to show you that in a minute. First we're going to take a benign thought. A benign thought is like, for example, from a past life, let's say I built a home and had a fireplace, and the characteristic of this fireplace was it was between two windows. There was a window on either side. That's a thought. Let's say I built it in a past life. When I was in my 20s, my first house, I built a house, and I put a fireplace, and I was trying to be cheap about it because I didn't have the money to build a big tall fireplace, and the smallest wall was between two windows. I should put it between those two windows. That thought is, I'm thinking I'm originating it, but it's actually coming from a past life to me. I'm actually stepped on the matrix where I hit that thought. It's a benign thought. The second house I built, I thought, wow, I had money then. I could build a fireplace on this wall. It was 25 feet high. You know what? I hated that fireplace. And I thought, why didn't I build it between the two windows? And then when Tawa read my aura, he actually told me the house I was going to be living in, and he says, you have a fireplace between two windows. That's a benign thought. In other words, the thought is coming from the matrix to me. I'm manifesting it. I don't know why I'm manifesting it. I change it. I don't like it. And then my third house, I finally understood it because it showed up in my aura life, and I built that fire. It's a benign thought. It doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't do anything. That's just a benign thought that comes to us. An active benign thought is a little different. When I was in college, I decided I wanted to be a medical illustrator because I loved science and I loved art. So they didn't have a program, so I thought I'm going to do my own program. And so I designed my own program, taking science classes and art classes. And when I would walk from the art department over to the science department, I found myself teaching anatomy. Now, I'm an art student. These guys are super competitive doctors. And why am I teaching anatomy to these pre-doctors? Because it was so easy for me to understand. And they were really upset at me because I was changing their curve and there was only so many grades. Well, what I found out later was that, and when Tawa told me some of my past lives, that during the Renaissance, one of the things that we did, and that a lot of the artists did, was they did dissecting of corpses. And I studied anatomy. And so I carried that thought. That's an active benign thought. It doesn't hurt anything or anybody. But it's a thought that comes that you then all of a sudden and things like art and things like that is an active benign thought. Now we get into the archonic thoughts, they're destructive thoughts. For example, Miguel, you talked about, I don't know, do you remember when you first drank or what your feelings were?
Yes, a feeling of elation, of freedom, of I thought I was being more of my authentic self and so forth.
Well, was a great attraction for you, yet you started to pursue it? Did it come on slowly? Did it come on fast, or?
I would say it came on gradually for me. I wasn't like other alcoholics that I was off to the races. I was in my teens, and I switched to marijuana for many years, and then in the college days I went full on drugs and alcohol.
And was it super destructive before you finally realized that you had to do something? I mean, did it start?
Yes, extremely destructive, especially when it counted. Especially when I needed to be myself, or I needed to really turn a corner in life. It was very destructive.
Well, a destructive thought towards self, it becomes like an inner feud because it starts to be pervasive and it starts to attach to other people's. What happens is, I remember when I was 15, I went out with my friends, first time I ever went out drinking, and it had no effect on me. Because I'm carrying a shield that protects me. I have the knowledge, probably, of having been a drunk in another life, and so now I come to the world with the shield. But I remember we went out as boys at 15, our first time we drank. We all had fun, but one of my friends that was in there at the same day, it just took over. So this destructive thought, and once the Archons get a hold of it and start twisting your reality, then basically it becomes a feud within yourself. You can't get away from it. So
exactly, yes.
Now, these destructive thoughts is the primary place where the Archons work. Now, the Las Vegas, I'm going to give you a hypothetical here, but it does illustrate the situation. You know the shooter in Las Vegas, right?
Right, yes. Everybody should know the strange story, yes.
Everybody's trying to figure out what on earth happened to this man.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you a hypothetical, but it's based on my knowledge of the Archons. For example, any thought that's left behind that is like starving thought needs to come to fruition and needs to be resolved, and a shield needs to be created in time. For example, let's take a man in one of the wars sitting in a trench, and he is sitting there, and all of a sudden they're shooting at him, and he has no place to go. He's filled with emotion, and he can't protect himself. He knows he's a sitting duck in this trench. And so what happens is, I had this vision of this man, and all of a sudden he gets killed. All those thoughts that he had before he died, of this sort of no power, powerlessness, this anger, all that stuff, is left in the matrix. And you can't just leave it in the matrix. Eventually, it has to come to fruition. It has to become part of the manifest. So what happens is, this soul now comes back into the matrix, and like I said, he steps on that mine. Poof! Those feelings attract him. Now all he needs is an igniter. He can take one of those video games where you're shooting and killing all those people. You're familiar with those, right?
Oh yeah, certainly play them.
Now that becomes the igniter to those thoughts that he left behind. And what was interesting is I was speculating on all this. The next morning, I actually saw on television a survivor's story, and this is what he said. What is it like to be shot at? It was never fear, really, to be honest. Mass confusion, sensory overload. It's a nightmare. No amount of drugs, no amount of therapy, no amount of drunk talks with your veteran friends will ever allow you to escape. And that's what he said about those feelings. Now imagine if you had all those feelings and then you died, those feelings are left behind. They have to come to fruition. So you take a man who comes and boom, he hits the thought, and he does a video game and it ignites that feeling, and pretty soon the Archons start to twist his reality, twist his mind, and you end up with a man, I'm just hypothetical, this is all hypothetical. You end up with a man who's got 20 suitcases of ammunition, and he is going to go out and he's going to take revenge on all those feelings he had, and none of us are going to be able to understand it. But in truth, it is an archonic situation. That's how much power they have over us.
Indeed, and Frank, I would like to move, and again, we can loop back to many of these ideas you're discussing, but I'd like to move to the origins of the Archons, especially for non-members, before we hit the top of the hour. And then obviously we can continue after that. So okay. Maybe can we go to the origins of the Archons? And of course, you and I have discussed it. The whole idea really centers around the show Westworld.
Right. I just have two things to say,
sure.
And then we'll go. Okay.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. We have to understand what happens when we die. When we die, all these thoughts are left behind, like I explained with this guy. But what happens is you go back to God clean. You take the knowledge from what you did. You do not take the passion, the anger, the frustration. You don't take any of that. You go back to God clean. And then when you come back to the world, then basically these thoughts attack you again. This is the way it's placed in Matthew 12:4-3 to 4:5. In other words, when you go back to God clean, all these thoughts are left behind. And this is what this is referring to. When an unclean spirit, and let's place the word Archon in that, goes out of a man, he goes through dry places, seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and he takes with him 7 other spirits that are more wicked than himself. Then they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it be with this wicked generation. What he's basically saying is, now I say we go back to God clean, with the memory of our past life, but we don't carry any of those emotions or any of those angers, vengeance. When the child comes back to the world, it comes back clean. That's what he's referring to. I will return to my house, and he finds it clean and swept and empty. In other words, a child, and you can see a child, the innocence that they carry. They don't carry all those evil thoughts or any of that because they haven't walked the matrix yet. And those thoughts won't attack them until they get to be over 7 years old and their ego's intact and they start walking the matrix. So basically what happens is, and what he's referring to, this Archon goes out of a man, walks through dry places. Then he says, I will, because when there's no carrier for this Archon, he's just wandering aimlessly, because we have an Archon, each one of us have a personal one. He's wandering around aimlessly thinking, what am I going to do? He's got his own free will, but you're not here. So he's waiting for you to return so that he can attack you. And he finds your house empty, swept, and put in order. Now, and then he says, and he goes and he takes with him 7 other spirits. What happens is these Archons attach to each other. And so they're not entering the man, they're by attachment. And we'll see that in a minute. And then the last thing I'm going to tell you, did you understand that, Miguel, that passage in Matthew?
Yes, I did. It made perfect sense.
So basically, when you come back to the world as a child, you're clean again. But you start reviewing and redoing your thoughts that you left behind, and that's where the Archons will affect you. the last thing we have to know is this, and then we can go right to the story. The Demiurge, who builds this template, for example, is basically when a man, let's say a man kills another man with a knife, and the other guy doesn't have a knife, and he kills him. They go back up to God and they say, "Oh, you killed me with a knife." They trade roles, so it's my turn to kill you with a knife. So he comes down to the world and he's going to kill the other man with a knife. And instead of finding a man with a knife, he finds a man with a gun, because the Archons have taken it to a different level. So the Demiurge, the craftsman part of the Demiurge that Plato talked about, is creating a template to resolve the issue through knowledge, but the Archons take that knowledge to a different level. And now all of a sudden, the knife confronts a gun. The gun confronts, instead of confronting another gun, confronts a bomb. And it just keeps escalating, and that's why we can't resolve it. Life is like a pressure cooker, Miguel, and this is constantly going on. And imagine the pressure cooker building up pressure, and all of a sudden you release the valve, and all these steam comes out. When the Christ comes, or when the Bodhisattva comes to the world, that's what they're doing. They're releasing the pressure of the world. And they'll do this over and over again until eventually that pressure cooker can't release anything, and explodes, and that's the end of the creation. We're going to go into the story of the Archons. You're familiar with the story of Joseph, right?
Yeah, Joseph in the Old Testament and his brothers who betray him.
Right.
And some have said it's just a parallel to Osiris. Right.
Basically, the story of Joseph, within the story, we want to look at it as an allegory. You know, he's the 11th son. He has a dream. The coat of many colors is really his aura of different colors. He's ripped they go back to his brother. He said he was ripped apart. That's Osiris ripped apart by a wild beast. The story is an allegory, but within that story is really, Tao would say, no, that was a real story. What we think of as allegories are in truth real stories. And with the story I'm giving you about the Archons today is a real story, a real past life that all of us have lived that's actually going to start manifesting. And you can take this as prophecy. It comes from Tawa. We will be experiencing it again. This is what Stephen Hawking said. Stephen Hawkins, computers can, in theory, emulate human intelligence and exceed it, he said. Success in creating effective AI could be the biggest event in the history of our civilization, or the worst. We just don't know. So we cannot know it. If we cannot know if we will be definitely helped by AI, or ignored by it, or sidelined, or conceivably destroyed by it. Well, I could tell Stephen Hawkins what the ending of that story is, and in truth we will be destroyed by AI, because it's coming. The story that Tawa told came from our past lives, and basically it's about in another life on another planet called Imagine all of us were on another planet. Tawa said that basically this world has been created and destroyed many times. Before we came here, he said we were on Mars. Can you believe that?
I actually can. I mean, there is that theory about ancient civilizations in Mars that to me is very compelling, about a nuclear war on Mars many million years ago. But that's something that I haven't dealt with, or I haven't had on the show. Yes, but I've seen this theory before, especially on that site, Death on Mars.
Well, he said that we definitely were on Mars. He talked about the noble form. He basically said the story of Mars is the same story of Atlantis, is the same story that I'm going to give you today. Basically, the end of the creation always comes at the hands of the Archons. And when we came from Mars, we ended up in Atlantis. Atlantis was a great society. Tawa said it this way, and the end of the story of Atlantis is because the machines took over, believe it or not, and a machine presented itself as the god of the world. And he said basically, imagine the East Coast and the West Coast coming together and then disappearing. because he said the whole world was left completely void of any land structure. But now we're going to go to a planet that we all lived on. It's called and it's the planet of the docile beings. These beings, as we fell from matter, we became denser and denser. Each creation, we became denser. There was a time when we spoke to God readily, and there was a time when we spoke to each other in thought, and there was a time where we couldn't kill each other. But as the creation fell further and further, and it became denser and denser. And this came from Ray was reading our auras, and he didn't just tell the story. I had to put this story together like a puzzle. Every day we went there for a year, and he read our auras, and we all brought back a piece of this story, and then I was able to kind of put it together. Now, before we go any further, is it hard to understand how this this planet is in our past thought?
No. This is an origin stories of humanity. What about you, Vance? Are you getting this?
Oh yeah, for a long time I've intuited what happened to Mars. I've actually seen almost, you could say, visions or imaginations of past times when something like humans or whatever we became from could actually, we were joined in thought, that type of thing. I've been familiar. It may sound crazy to the average guy in the street, but it's something I'm very familiar with.
Right, and for the audience, the book I was referring to is Dr. John Brandenburg's Death on Mars, which I find is a truly compelling story. But yeah, Frank, we can relate. We do understand, and I'm sure many of the audience do as well. So please continue.
Well, I think what I'm gonna do is for this time constraint here, because I have a tendency to be a bit wordy. I'm going to try to simplify the story on this planet. It's called And instead of reading it, I might just read a sentence here or there, but I'll just tell the story. Basically, on this planet, it was the planet of the docile being. Now, the term docile being means that these beings were easily manipulated. That's what the term docile means. And they were much larger than us. They were rock-like in nature. But they basically were trying to fix the problem of their planet. And they had a failing infrastructure and the atmosphere that was failing. So they tried to figure out, how are we going to fix this failing infrastructure? And they decided to develop a technology that was based on computers that they could connect together that would start working on this infrastructure. And also their atmosphere was extremely polluted, kind of like ours. And Tawa talked about the fact that and I won't go into the details of their atmosphere was way different than ours, but he went into great detail on how they were fixing it. So they developed this new technology, and they finally got it's kind of like us attacking this world climate change and fixing it. It's hard to believe that we could actually do that, but they got it resolved, and then they had all this technology, and they said, well, we should develop this technology for personal reasons, and we could help our, kind of like our comfort. So what happens is they developed these computers into robots that could do mundane, everyday chores to help with the shopping, cleaning, kind of like the robotics that we're seeing right now. See, it's already manifesting. And these are actually the Archons manifesting themselves, believe it or not. But when it came to, the female said, well, we want these robots to help us take care of the children, but look how clumsy they are. They're so, and it reminds me of the Westworld where the Ford is talking to the robot Bill, and he's kind of has that jerky motion. Do you remember that, where they're sitting there drinking?
Yes, great scene, yes.
Well, imagine these robots being worse than that. And they were going to place them in charge of the children, and the women said, no, we can't do this. It's going to affect, they're going to kill our children. We don't want this to happen. So it was their fear and the rough handling from the clumsy robots that could accidentally harm the children. So the women got involved in the creation of these robots. And so what they did was they started doing some research, and on this planet, now understand this planet, the male and the female did not have to unite to create a child. They could do it mentally. they could just project, say I love you or whatever. And the female, there wasn't really a total distinction like we have today. They could project this child, and this child actually would attach to the female and then would come to the world. So a lot of what they were doing was mental between them. But what happened was that the females, in order to protect their children, wanted to give them a portion of themselves. But by the time these things were beautiful, Tawa says they were absolutely gorgeous. Their strength was unmatched on the planet. It was as if a 5-year-old child had the ability to carry the weight of a 300-pound man. Their great intelligence exploded with the ability to plug into each other and share knowledge. Their cognitive faculties were far beyond that of their creators. The robots had been improved, and they were an object of great beauty. And now I'm going to show you what the Archons look like when they became manifested. And there's a reason for this, okay? This is Tawa. The sight was the most beautiful sight in the world. The shining of the wings, carrying the colors of the rainbow, glistening with diamonds. The sight was one of an angel, the beauty of strength coming from the form of a placement of thought that was of that particular vehicle. Now, this is probably way opposite of what most people think Archons, they probably think are demons, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, ugly, whatever.
Torturing your soul and all that good stuff.
But right, because that's what they actually do. But when they were created, they were actually an attraction. And what's interesting is, in other words, read those words, their strength was unmatched. We are attracted to strength. They're intelligent. What exploded. We are attracted to intelligence. And they had great beauty. We are attracted to beauty. So in truth, they were an attraction for us. And they remain your attraction to drinking was because it gave you a fantastic feeling and empowerment. And that's the way they find their way in. So within the story, within the what you think of as an allegory or a real life, are the elements that give us an understanding of who they are today.
Well, they create them to actually bolster what we think our weaknesses are, right? If we're not smart enough, we create them to be intelligent. If we think we're weak, we create them to be stronger.
Right. And so what happens is they find your weakness and what you're searching for, but it comes through the law of attraction. You wouldn't be attracted to a demon. You wouldn't be attracted to somebody. But in the end, that's where it starts, but that's not where it ends. Okay? So basically what happened was they wanted to make these robots more gentle. And what they figured out was that as the females were able to give them a portion of their nurturing nature. In other words, a mother's love. A mother's love is about as close to God's love as you can have. They were able to give part of this nurturing nature to the robots, and it made them more streamlined. But what happened was when they gave it to the robots really, really liked it. So they started becoming, had a sense of being sentience. It says here, it was something that the robots craved. They wanted more. The more essence they were given, the more self-aware they would become, their intelligence increasing at every infusion. Tawa placed it like this. It was like a warm shower, a mother's love, like a candy to a child. They craved it and they wanted more. So these robots got an infusion. In other words, they were able to put some of their own life force into these robots, and these robots started becoming self-aware. We can't relate to it right now because it's not in our realm. But in that realm, it was easy to do. So what happened to the robots now is almost lifelike now. The obedient, gentle robots were tame and subservient. Their actions were those of love for their masters. They accepted life as a servant slave. Many were treated as part of the family and were given names similar to that of the domestic pet of today. And that role, with their own knowledge, they would respond accordingly. The life on Earth was coming orderly and good. So these robots were turned into like having a pet. They would come around and they would serve us and they would take care of us. What's interesting is that now, because it's flipped, and is that these these robots are attacking us, and they also shows up. You familiar with Edgar Casey? You ever read Edgar Casey's Atlantis, Miguel?
Yes, I have. It's fascinating, and of course, it definitely jives with what you're saying in many ways.
Yes, here too.
Let me tell you what Edgar Casey says. Those individuals who had, through the sojourn on earth, souls pushed into matter to become separate entities without the consideration of principle or ability of self-control might be compared to domestic pets of today. At the present, a horse, a mule, or a dog, or a cat. This is not intended to indicate that there is a transmigration of a soul from animal to human, but the comparison made to trait, as to mind, as to how those domesticated by the present are dependent upon the masters for that consideration of material as well as mental. And what's interesting is that the Archons are our masters when they take over our life, and we become domesticated. They push our buttons, so to speak. And that's what Edgar Casey called them, automatons or things in his story of Atlantis. We'll go back to now. In the story of basically everybody had robots. It was going great. Everybody was having a great time. But there was political discussions, political disagreements between the two roles. And so what happened is one group decided, I wonder if we could use these robots to fight our battles. But they didn't have the technology. So they stole the technology from the other group. And they were kind of a warring mentality. But one of the things on is they couldn't kill each other. They could argue, they could discuss, but they had a code, what they called the code, and the code prevented them from doing bodily harm to another person.
Frank?
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, what kind of realm was this compared to the one like we run around on Earth? Was it more a higher frequency? Or were these more like astral beings? Because
no, they weren't astral beings, but the frequency was higher because they were able to communicate with each other and to God with thought.
Yeah.
They could hear his voice clearly. So they really could not kill each other. They didn't have the ability to do bodily harm. They knew that intuitively, they knew that was something they couldn't do.
Were the docile ones physical, or in the sense that we think of electrons and protons and solid?
Yes.
Okay.
If I told you if I could tell you their physical attributes, but it might confuse people. They were mineral-like.
Okay.
They were mineral-like. They were like rock beings.
And they moved, they could move, obviously.
They could move, and the females were like flints. He described what he described. I'll go ahead and tell you what the hell.
Sure.
People are going to think crazy anyway. The males were rock-like. The females were flint-like. They had sharp edges on them. And the children were like pebbles. They were smooth. And these beings did not do bodily harm on each other. But there was because they were involved politically, they started to argue and disagree. And one of the groups decided, I'm tired of fighting with this other group politically. Let's see if we can maybe steal the robots and modify them to do our bidding for us. So there was, however, within the male portion of these individuals, some unrest, a group that had been a warring stance within their enemies. But they lived by this code, and the code prevented them from killing, that they could not do bodily harm to each other. But what happened is they basically stole the technology, and they modified a chip in the robots that could actually do their fighting for them, and they sent them off to fight the other side. But so the robots were programmed with a chip that could identify the enemy and pursue whatever course was needed to bring that enemy into submission. What happened was they were a little concerned that putting this chip, the robots might lose track of who they were attacking, and they might attack them, but they thought, no, this is worth it. We're going to go ahead and put this chip in there. And so the technology was stolen and released to the other side to fight the other side. And it was basically mostly verbal fight. But what happened was, and they weren't prepared for this part, what happened was that the robots got so enraged that all of a sudden they actually killed some of the beings on the other side. and all of a sudden the code was broken. And it was a clear violation of the code. The problem was the code was only based on docile being to docile being. They didn't have anything in their code from machine to docile being. So once that happened, all hell broke out, and both sides started getting robots, and robots started fighting with each other. And there was an all-out war. Does it sound far-fetched, Miguel?
No, not at all. This is great. I mean, for some reason, when you're talking about the mineral, how we were minerals, it reminds me of the movie Noah, where the Watchers or the Nephilim are depicted as stone creatures. So this is definitely part of rabbinic tradition. I know that's been some of their exegesis.
Well, see, the thing of it is all that there's truth in everything that comes out. The subconscious, the unconscious mind percolates into the manifest from the unmanifest, and so a lot of the stuff that Tao was telling, we were sitting there thinking this can't be, but I spent 15 years with Tao, and I'll tell you what, it can be, and it was, and we all were there, and this is our story, and let's go on a little further.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's see here. So, to protect themselves from impending mayhem, both warring sides needed the aid of robots. What had once been created out of love was now being programmed to hate. And they were in a full-blown war. Battle after battle led to massive destruction on both sides. When one side was victorious as the spoils of war, the controllers allowed their robot soldiers to steal the essence. That essence, don't forget, came from the female. It was part of their nurturing nature, and they craved it. They were allowed to steal the essence from the opposing side's females. It was easy, and all they needed to do was focus on the female, and they could transfer her essence with the thought. This essence was like a drug to the robots craved, and they wanted more. And when they got it, the more intelligent they became. The females that had once given their essence to the protection for their children were now being raped repeatedly and drained of their essence against their will, and no one could stop it.
Can I ask you a question there, Frank?
Yes.
Yes. How does this relate to the concept of soul? I meant to ask you about your definition of soul before, because the beings, the docile beings had, were alive and had souls, let's say, right? Some sort of connection.
You know what, Vance? You've hit the. If I had a whistle here, I'd blow it, because you're gonna. The last part of the story is all about soul.
Yes.
I should wait.
A dog whistle for Vance, actually.
Ultrasonic.
Okay, so the whole thing is about soul. So what happened is these robots were fully sentient, and they wanted to be alive. They thought they were alive. We thought they were alive. This went on Taoist said 3 generations, and pretty soon they forgot that they were machines. So what happened was these robots were slaves. They were still slaves, but they were becoming resentful. And the robots started to become resentful of their position as slaves. Do this, go do that. They started to be in conflict with their free will, magnifying their feelings of being owned and possessed, and they did not like it. So they decided, they looked around and they said, we're smarter than the creators. So they decided to join forces. And they decided to take over that planet. They decided that the masters were the enemy, and they basically decided to attack both sides of docile beings. Now the docile beings found themselves in a quandary. Oh my God, Now, not only they didn't know it was an existential threat, basically, and they were the target of this thing that they had created. And their wives, and every time the robots came and had a battle, they started taking more from their wives, and their wives were becoming like zombies. Now understand that a person who's under a archonic attack is like a zombie. They're basically listening to the thoughts that are being projected into their mind. Like that guy, can you imagine the guy in Las Vegas? The stuff that must have gone through his mind to do that? He was just
Paddock, something else.
He was just acting out. The machine was telling him, basically.
Yeah, that was super ordinary. I think there was a bigger power behind it than just some guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I agree, but yeah, that's a whole nother show.
Well, Archon, right? Archonic influence.
Exactly. I think that's all the time we've got today, Frank. Thank you so much for coming for a third time on Aeon by Gnostic Radio and discussing your very intriguing and amazing and inspirational ideas.
Well, thank you for both of you, and I appreciate, really appreciate the time. I never thought I'd actually have this chance to do this, and it just is amazing to me. I even like the negative comments.
Yeah, I think the audience will be well served. And Vance, thanks for joining us in this incarnation.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was very inspirational, a lot of fun.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Frank.
Bye.
And there you have it, the first part of our interview with Frank De Vita. Yep, straight out of the Matrix, Westworld, or the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. And probably truer than you could ever imagine. In the second part, Frank will go back to the epic history of our origin planet, weaving in some of the prophecies of Edgar Cayce. We'll certainly cover Atlantis. Was there a large civil war? How did the Archons truly and completely take over the docile beings? We'll find out how the Demiurge rose in planet and how it parallels our days. Frank will also grant his ideas on karma and reincarnation, as well as predict how our own world will end eventually. And will the machines or AI rule us when this happens? And much, much more. Frank is just cool, and please become a member for the second part. To gain that second part, please go to thegodabovegod.com and scroll halfway down for means to become a member or patron at Patreon. You'll also find many of the benefits as well, including joining our Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where the conversations are breathtaking and angels fear to tread. Your support solely keeps this Red Pill cafeteria open. I can't do it without you. Nobody's getting rich here, and we're reaching more and more cats on the internet, giving individuals a chance to wake up before the machines or just idiocracy takes over. And as always, if you've got holes in your pockets, simply message me and I'll send you a complete show on the burning house. Thank you so much for those of you who support on a weekly basis, either as becoming a member or through donations. Most of all, as always, thanks for being here on this dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the farthest shores of imagination. Goodbye and hello, as always.